Hello there, and welcome to Cybersecurity Today. I'm Jim Wiggins, the host of this show. In case this is the first time that you've seen our show, let me provide you with a quick overview. We've developed this show to deal with the topic of cybersecurity. I'm a longtime practitioner in the cybersecurity industry, and here we tackle the subject of computer security in an exciting and thought-provoking manner. This show is a 30-minute program that uses a talk show newscast format to discuss themes, topics, and current events in the cybersecurity space. If you want to learn more about cybersecurity, you've come to the right place. For those viewers who are current practitioners, like myself, this show will provide thought leadership from cyber experts on the direction of the cybersecurity industry. So we're really focused on trying to serve a number of different stakeholder groups, from the beginner all the way to the subject matter expert. We hope you enjoy today's program. Now, before we get started, let me provide you an overview of today's show. We typically separate the show into two sections. We will have our first segment called Cyber Bites. This segment covers a number of current events that are occurring today in the cybersecurity industry. Then, in our second segment, we have Dr. Vijay Krishna from the ANSI National Accreditation Board coming onto the show to discuss the role of accreditation when dealing with cybersecurity certifications. If you're considering pursuing a personal certification in a multitude of areas such as offensive or penetration testing, forensics, or incident handling, understanding whether the program you are pursuing is accredited can make a big difference. We've asked Dr. Krishna to come onto the show to discuss what accreditation is and how it helps determine the value of a certification program. Dr. Krishna is the Vice President of Credentialing for the ANSI National Accreditation Board. So he's going to be a great resource to discuss this topic, and we're very excited to have him as a guest on Cybersecurity Today. Okay, let's get into the Cyber Bites and talk about what's going on in the cybersecurity industry. In current news, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, sometimes known as CISA, published a phishing infographic to help protect both organizations and individuals from successful phishing operations. In case you're unfamiliar with phishing, let me talk about it for a moment. Phishing is a form of social engineering in which a cyber threat actor poses as a trustworthy colleague, an acquaintance, or even an organization to lure a victim into providing sensitive information or potentially network access. These lures come in the form of emails, text messages, or even sometimes phone calls. When they're successful, these techniques can enable threat actors to gain initial access to a network and affect the targeted organization and even related third parties that an organization might be connected to. The result can be data breaches, data or service losses, identity fraud, malware infection, or even the nefarious ransomware type of attack that we've talked about previously. This infographic provides a visual summary of how threat actors execute successful phishing operations. Details include metrics that compare the likelihood of certain types of bait and how commonly each bait type succeeds in tricking the targeted individual. The infographic also provides detailed actions organizations and individuals can take to prevent successful phishing operations, from blocking phishing attempts and also to teaching individuals how to report successful phishing operations. More information on this infographic can be found at www.cisa.gov/phishing-infographic. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be back with our guest, Dr. Vijay Krishna, and discuss the value of accreditation when dealing with cybersecurity certifications. This segment will be very valuable to anyone looking to get into cyber or planning maybe to expand their current cyber careers with new certifications. We'll see you back here in just a few minutes.
Trying to straighten your teeth yourself can cause serious damage and tooth loss. Moving teeth is a healthcare procedure that needs the supervision of an orthodontist. These are experts in moving teeth and aligning jaws. For more, visit mylifemysmile.org.
Welcome back to Cybersecurity Today. For our second segment, we're being joined today by Dr. Vijay Krishna from the ANSI National Accreditation Board, sometimes known as ANAB. Dr. Krishna is the Vice President of Credentialing at the ANAB organization. His responsibilities encompass the leadership of the ANSI credentialing accreditation programs. This includes the ISO 17024 program for personal certification bodies, the ANSI ASTM 2659 program for training certificates, and the CFP, Conference for Food Protection program for food safety professional certification bodies. Dr. Krishna is a recognized expert in the field of personal certification accreditation. Dr. Krishna, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jim, for having me.
Absolutely. We're really excited to have you here. I thought maybe we'd ask if we could start by having you talk a little bit about your background in the credentialing and accreditation industry. I tried to summarize it, but I'm sure you could probably speak a little bit more to your background.
Sure. So before coming into certification and accreditation world, I was in academia. So I was teaching MBA students. I got my doctorate in human and organization learning, essentially looking in terms of how do you increase the learning capacity of individuals, groups, organization. And at the time, ANSI, the American National Standards Institute, was getting into starting accreditation based on this standard, which looks at competence of certification body. So it seemed like a really good fit for me, like my background in psychometrics, assessment, learning. And so I decided to join ANSI, and then for the past 15 years, I've been in certification, accreditation, working with certification bodies across sectors, from cyber to healthcare, and also spending a lot of time internationally working with the ANSI and ANAB's counterparts in other countries, looking in terms of how can we, come to a consensus globally in terms of quality certification. There is something called as multilateral recognition arrangement. I've been consulting with the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. So, primarily my passion is in terms of how can we, look in terms of competence-based education, competence-based credentialing, and have value for clients who are looking to use, certified individuals.
So a pretty diverse or pretty solid background. So you brought up ANSI, and I just, maybe for our audience, maybe people have probably heard of it, they've maybe seen the name on the labels and stuff, but could you talk to a moment about what ANSI does in terms of setting national standards for the United States?
So ANSI stands for the American National Standards Institute. ANSI has been around for more than 100 years. And it was started by 3 federal agencies, the Department of Commerce, the Department of War, and at the time in the Navy. Essentially to create a public sector driven public-private partnership to create national consensus-based standards. So if you look at what ANSI does, it works with various professional association bodies that come together, create standards, and when they go through the ANSI process, these standards get designated as American national standards, and then they get incorporated by reference in legislation. So you have building codes to I think last when I looked at it, there were over 11,000 American national standards.
Wow.
So
interesting. That's impressive. We talked a little bit about ANAB, and we were talking about ANSI. Are they the same organization, or what's the role between ANAB and ANSI? Maybe you can explain that as well for our audience.
Sure. So ANSI looks in terms of essentially the standards development aspect of it. It works very, very closely with ISO, which is the International Organization for Standardization. It works bilaterally with a lot of countries. So if you think of ANSI, it's more to do with developing standards. Now ANAB, which is fully owned subsidiary of ANSI, which is the ANSI National Accreditation Board, is into what we would call it as accreditation or conformity assessment. So ANAB, ANAB, essentially accredits various type of certification bodies across sectors. So it could be product certification bodies that do product testing. It could be lab, medical lab, forensic lab, management systems. So, and we are the biggest accreditation body in North America, and with over 3,000, I believe, or 2,500 organizations, CABs, we call them as conformity assessment bodies that are accredited.
Understood. So we've used the term certification, and we've also used the term accreditation. Can you explain the difference? Are they the same thing, or are they different?
Yeah, and it's interesting, Jim, like, many times these words are thrown around, people talk about certification, certificate, licensed, registered, accredited, without really recognizing what those differences are. So in terms of when you talk about accreditation, it's the organization, the entity that is accredited. And when we talk about certification, it's the individual who is certified. So, you would not say an individual is accredited, it's the organization or the programmatic accreditation, or typically we talk about a university or an educational institution being accredited, or a hospital being accredited, or a certification body or a lab being accredited, not an individual. So accreditation is at the organization level, and the certification or the certified would be the individual who holds a certification.
So then I take it then that the accreditation is usually focused at the certification body level. Is that a good way to think of it?
Right.
So ANAB accredits the organization, and then the organization certifies the individual.
Right.
Is that how that works?
Right. Yeah. So ANAB essentially is looking at the competence, the certification body. How are they structured? Are they offering a valid certification? And then that certification body then would be certifying individuals, in this case of the standard that I am responsible for.
And that's an ISO standard, correct?
Yes,
that's 17024. Can you speak to that for a little bit in terms of like what it is and how that's used within the accreditation for these certification bodies?
Right. So the standard, like ISO has a numbering system. So ISO 17024. If you look at what that standard is called, it's called as assessing the competence of the certification body. So what that standard essentially looks at is the certification body competent enough to offer a valid, reliable, fair certification. So how the certification is structured, how it controls for impartiality, do they offer an independent third-party certification do they have a valid complaints process, appeals process, recertification, job analysis. So if you look at the scope of the standard, 17024, it's essentially looking at the competence of the certification body. And it's because it's an ISO standard, it's a global standard, and there are, I believe, close to 50 countries that actually accredit against ISO 17024. So it's not just a standard which is used in the United States, it's a standard which is used globally by different accreditation bodies to accredit certification bodies that certify, we call them a certification of persons or personal certification in this case, so certifying people.
So if somebody like in our audience was going to pursue a certification, then having that accreditation would demonstrate then that the certification body has met a certain level of competence or rigor in terms of that standard, correct?
Right, right.
Can you speak to just a moment about the level of detail that the standard gets into? You mentioned job task analysis,
Right.
appeals. Is it a cursory summary, or is it go pretty deep, would you say?
Right. That's a good question. Like, for instance, when you go and you want to get a degree or diploma, you would, look for an accredited university, right? That's the first thing you say, is this university accredited? Similarly, if you go to a medical facility, you go to a lab, you want to make sure that the lab itself is meeting certain set of requirements. There is accountability built in. So similarly, when you're looking at a certification program that you want to get, you want to make sure that the certification body itself is competent. So what the standard does, and it's a very, very detailed standard, it's a very rigorous process, not just the standard part of it. The application of that standard that ANAB does in terms of making sure that the certification body meets those requirements, that's very extensive. It's time consuming in the sense that it's not something that an organization would just come and say we want to be accredited. It's a very rigorous process. It can take organizations 6 months to a year to go through the process. It looks at how you're structured, looks at your finances. It looks in terms of, is the certification really reflecting practice? That's one of the critical elements. If you have prerequisites, how are those prerequisites determined? How do you ensure continued competence? Because the most important thing is, when you talk about certification, you want to make sure the people who are certified or claiming to be certified. So a certification body makes a claim that this person has the competence to practice, right? So how do you back up that claim? So that's where we come in, and we use an international standard. We do an independent third-party assessment, and if they meet those requirements, then we are able to say, yes, this organization is in compliance with this international standard.
So you brought up degrees or college. I want to, in the cyber world, there's always this kind of ebb and this pull and push. You know, do you go with the certification? Do you get the degree? What's your perspective on the best way to evaluate competence when it comes to maybe like a cybersecurity professional? I know cyber's not your focus, but we talked about competence. Does one, are there advantages to one over the other in your estimation?
Yes. So in terms of like, when I look at education, degrees, certificates versus certification, the fundamental difference, the way in which I see it is there is, your degrees, diplomas, certificates, training. These are ways to build competence, to acquire competence. You go to an educational institution, you acquire competence in cyber and medical. When you look at certification, it's not really about acquiring competence. It's actually validating, confirming that you have the competence to practice. So the beauty of this is these are parallel tracks, and for people have a choice. They can decide if they want to build competence, what's the route, right? They can go and get a degree, they can go a certificate, they can take an apprenticeship, they can have on-the-job learning. At the same time, they have to demonstrate that they have the competence, right? If I say, I went to a certain training program, how do you know that training program really helped you to acquire the competence? So when we talk about certification, it's an independent third-party assessment. If you have the competence, you meet the prerequisites, you pass the assessment, and then you demonstrate competence. So it provides an alternate track. And for employers and people who use this certification, it's a way for them to know, has this person demonstrated competence to practice?
Understood. Thank you. I want to talk now a little bit about the role of accreditation within cyber certification programs. And I know you're familiar with DoD 8570. There are several government agencies out there that have mandates or requirements that their individuals have to obtain a certification. I'm curious as to how does ANAB play in that particular space? Do they help any of the accreditation for those particular initiatives?
Right. Yes. So one of the a major challenge that facing is our country is the number of certification programs out there. So technically anyone can start a certification program and say I'm certifying individuals. So I believe there are 4,000 to 5,000 certification programs.
Wow.
In the United States. So someone can come and tell you I'm a certified cyber professional, right? Or I'm a certified financial planner. And if you say, who has certified you? They say, World Financial Institute, right? What does that mean? No one really knows that, right? Sure. So you want to have assurance that the certification body itself has met certain set of requirements and is held accountable. So when the Department of Defense passed the 8570 directive and then 8570 manual, one of the things that they were really clear is we want the certification bodies to meet the highest standards, to meet the highest accreditation requirements for us to use those certification. Imagine DoD sending their employees for certification that do not have labor market value, where they're just going, taking certification, passing the test, and there is no accountability built in. So DoD came up with the directive and the manual where they directed that all cybersecurity certifications that DoD wants to use or for their contractors must be accredited by ANSI under the 17024 program. And what it does is it provides an accountability mechanism. It ensures to DoD that the certifications have gone through a valid process, they are vetted, and these certification, and it's not just one-time effort that you get accredited and you're done, right? So it's something that you have to do an ongoing basis every year. There is an assessment happening. We have assessors who are trained professionals who go and do an assessment. They spend time looking at the documentation. They have an on-site visit. They do witnessing every year to make sure that the organization is continuing to demonstrate competence and meeting the requirements. And if they don't, there is a mechanism to make sure that they are in compliance. Otherwise, they will lose their accreditation. So it provides confidence for an agency. It could be OSHA, it could be FDA, it could be DoD, it could be EPA, that the certification that they are using, where they are putting in money, is something that meets the highest standards out there.
And it also sounds like there's a certain level of currency that has to be maintained on a regular basis, right, by that level of rigor. So yeah, I can see the value of that. Let's talk now about employers. Do employers look for accredited certifications when they hire individuals? I mean, are you familiar with like human resource individuals saying we want accredited programs that are out there?
So what we are seeing now is more employers are looking for certification. And the way in which they phrase it is they phrase it in terms of industry validated, nationally portable certification out there. So, we are trying to educate them in terms of the value of accredited certification. So they may not specifically say that certification has to be accredited. But I think we are moving towards there where, they would start, requiring certifications to be accredited. I know in some industries, some employers do look for that because that's an added value. It's an additional safeguard. They can have more confidence that this certification body itself is held accountable and has met certain requirements. So that's something which we are seeing more. I think the Workforce Development Center at Georgetown University is tracking how employers are posting their job postings, and a number of cases where they are saying you can have a degree or you can have a certification. So that's something that's constantly evolving.
Understood. Thank you. I'd like to talk a moment about the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education. There's this framework out there that the government's in the process of adopting, and I was wondering if you had any thoughts on how this standardization will impact the credentialing market, what ANAB thinks about it. I mean, it seems to be almost like a centralization to some extent of a lot of that competency discussion that we were having earlier. And they're trying to ultimately drive it for the purpose of standardizing some of the roles and the functions and things like that. Any thoughts on how that's going to influence the market moving forward?
Yeah. Personally, I've been involved with the NICE framework, and that's something which I like it, and I think it's a huge value that is available to all kinds of industries. It's a publicly open source document, right, which came out first in 2010. So what the NICE framework is looking at is it's defining all the cyber work roles, right, everything that's out there. And they're looking in terms of for each of these roles, what is the task that is required to be done? And then for each of those tasks, what is the knowledge, what are the skills, what are the attitudes and attributes that's required? And it's based on a very valid process that they have done. They have gone through, what we would call it as putting together the expert panel, SME process. Each of these competencies have to be validated. They have revised it at least 2 or 3 times. I think the latest one is 2020 version, which is now currently in vogue. So what it does is it provides a foundation for cybersecurity certifications, cybersecurity education and training in this country, and also for employers and public-private partnership, which makes it really a very useful foundation to build upon credentialing system in this country for cybersecurity.
That's great. Thank you. I wanted to talk, we've only got a couple minutes left, but I wanted to ask about maybe some future trends. Are there any trends or initiatives that you envision impacting in the cyber market that our viewers should be aware of, or as they consider obtaining any of the certifications? Are you guys seeing any artificial intelligence, virtual reality? I didn't know if there were things you were starting to see. Yeah,
one of the things is, and this is my personal opinion, is cyber is no longer the domain of certain individuals, right, in an organization. Now every citizen has to have some kind of cyber literacy, some kind of cyber skill set to be able to defend the organization, defend himself or herself, defend the nation. So we are seeing more and more entry-level certifications, entry-level training, assessment-based certificates coming. I interact with a lot of credentialing organizations who are looking to expand. So, it's both vertical expansion, more in-depth, more for professionals, higher skilled certifications, as well as one which is more generic, more that everyone needs to have. So I think it's really important to see just like some of the basic skills getting globalized and nationalized, that some of the cyber skills knowledge, attributes, and to me it would almost seem like a mindset, right? You need to have that mindset that this is a new reality where we have to be alert all the time. We have to have the right tools, and those tools are not just tools in terms of softwares, but tools are also human capabilities and human competence to be able to effectively deter and address the cyber threats.
So Dr. Krishna, last question for you. How can viewers of the show learn about ANAB and its accreditation process?
So definitely you can go to the ANAB website, www.anab.org. And there's a lot of information in terms of who is accredited, publicly available resources, not just accreditation towards the 17224 program, lab, product, management system, verification. That's a great resource. And the other resource that I would also want to point out is there is a fully owned subsidiary of ANSI called as WorkCred. So their website is workcred.org, workcred.org. And they have a lot of resources, especially the one that I would point is they have a fact sheet that talks about differences between different types of credentials, licensure, certification, certificate. So I would definitely encourage people to go and check out these websites. Of course, ANSI website, ansi.org, a lot of information about standards, international conformity assessment. So these are good resources that companies can access, certification bodies, credentialing organizations, to essentially know what's happening in the country as it relates to standardization efforts, conformity assessment, and these are valid in a place where you can get reliable. So if you're looking for a certification, looking for an organization, want to find out if it's truly accredited or not, go to the public directory and find out from the source.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you very much for coming in and sharing your expertise. We're very appreciative of you spending time with us today and talking to us about accreditation. So that's going to do it for today's episode. We again want to thank Dr. Krishna for coming in and talking to us, obviously about the role of accreditation in choosing cybersecurity certifications. We hope that you found the information in today's show interesting and useful, and that you learned something new about cybersecurity. If you'd like to learn more about cybersecurity today and keep tabs on upcoming episodes, please check out the show's website at www.cybersecuritytoday.org. You can also reach out to us with questions or comments at our email, which is contactus@cybersecuritytoday.org. We look forward to seeing you at our next broadcast. Thanks a lot for joining us. Have a great day.